Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Cybersecurity Recruiter podcast. Today, I'm joined by Joseph. Joseph, how you doing, my friend?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm good, man. For all the listeners, so me and Joseph had some technical issues, so we're having to do a bit of a rerun, my friend, aren't we? So this should be a banging episode for the listeners. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think so. It's funny when the IT guy has problems with his network router and has to bail on a podcast because of technical issues.
Yeah, don't worry, mate. I'll let you off. It sounds like you've been busy, mate, with the baseball coaching and the little ones and work and stuff like that. So
Absolutely.
I know how hectic life can get, but I'm looking forward to the show, Joseph. I know from the stuff we did before we had the issues, it was a good show. So I'm looking forward to doing this again. And just to give everyone listening a bit of an insight. Joseph's been around a long time, been in the game for a little while now. Started back in 2005 at Lockheed Martin, progressed really nicely, associate member of engineering staff, system engineer, and you were there for around about 7.5 years, not quite. You then went on to Honeywell. You were a senior information assurance analyst. You would then progressed up to management. GRSI, you were cybersecurity engineering manager. You were then at Netizen Corp, which is where you are now as well, for the lead security engineer. You were then part of Scientific Research Corporation. Again, you were in a management role as a cybersecurity engineer. You were then a senior technical portfolio manager at Prascent Analytics, and currently
Prescient. Nobody can
Prescient.
say it.
Yeah, sorry. If no one can say I'm really bad anyway, so I'm surprised I got
Don't
even
feel bad
close.
about that one.
And at the minute, mate, you've progressed all the way to director level, and you are currently the director of cybersecurity. So apart from that last one, there, mate, did I do okay?
Yeah, you're great.
Cool. I've done you a bit of an intro, Joseph, but I can never do it as well as you. If I'll start where I always start, which is who are you, my friend, and what you up to on a day-to-day basis, and yeah, how are things going professionally and everything.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for the intro. So I'm Joseph Carr, Joe Carr, whatever you want to call me. I currently am the information system security manager for a DevSecOps platform supporting the U.S. Army's training systems. So we do force on target, force on force training systems, everything from tanks rolling down a track, shooting at simulated tanks and infantry, to thousands of soldiers out in an instrumented range area playing really fancy laser tags games. Started out with Lockheed as a sysadmin, cut my teeth using Solaris, and progressed my way up as I was at Lockheed, got my master's degree in systems engineering, and got into cyber completely by accident. Had a site that I was working at in New Jersey, and we were told, hey, you need to do, it was called DITSCAP at the time, but they said, you need to do a DITSCAP accreditation. And I said, okay, what's that? And they said, we don't really know. So figured out how to do that and was told, yeah, we don't take DITSCAP anymore as of Friday. This was a Monday. You need to do DIACAP now. And I said, well, what's that? And they said, we don't know. And yeah, so I've been in it or adjacent to it ever since.
Cool, yeah. I mean, we talk about getting comfortable, being uncomfortable on the show quite a bit. And if you've got people saying, I don't know what you're doing, I can imagine you perhaps had to get a little bit used to getting comfortable, being uncomfortable, shall we say.
Yeah, absolutely. The only one of my old mentors used to say the only constant is change. So
Yeah, definitely, especially in security. But
yeah,
Joseph, look, that the type of work you're describing there with force on force and tanks and so on and so forth is always vital, always important. At the minute, Israel, Russia, Iran, you name it, drone attack. There was something in the news yesterday or the day before about a drone attack in I think it was Iran on Israel. The world's pretty scary at the minute. Pretty crazy world we live in right now. So I'm imagining that the space you're in is pretty busy. Have you noticed any uptick or any additional kind of demand with what's going on at the minute?
absolutely. And actually, really quick, one of the technologies that I used to work on when I was at Lockheed was ballistic missile defense. And we actually, the US has two destroyers sitting and was actually part of the active defense of Israel last week. And we've had destroyers and cruisers out in the Med and in the Red Sea and some of the other areas in the Gulf downing drones and missiles from attacks from the Houthis. Yeah, it's crazy to see stuff that I worked on 10 years ago being used in practice now. But certainly today with the war in Ukraine, with things that are going on around the world, we're in a really different type of political and military doctrine. And the training sites that we have, there's no white space. There's no time for us to go and do the typical cyber stuff that we have to do. We're at the mercy of the units that want to go in for training, and they get definitely precedence over us.
Yeah, wow, mate. It's first of all, mate, thank you for being involved with that because that is literally, again, it's always been important, but it's literally when I'm watching the news and I'm sure other people listening the same, it's literally scary. So, like, to these defense systems that are built and the likes of yourself have put time, effort, expertise, knowledge into, it is just invaluable, priceless, isn't even the word. It's literally life saving, isn't it? It's pretty important.
Yeah, for us to be able to send soldiers into a simulated area, we have towns that are set up. We have actors that come in that will set up markets, and for them to go into a real world scenario using their weapons, their trucks, their tanks, their Apache helicopters and Black Hawk helicopters, and be able to do training against a simulated enemy. We've been doing it for decades, but
Mm.
we're able to do it now with new capabilities that enable us to get realism close to what it's like on the battlefield through live virtual and constructive means.
I wasn't going to ask you this, Joseph, but I will do. If I'm listening and I'm thinking, do you know what? Like, this sounds like a hugely stimulating day-to-day role. It sounds like the sort of thing where I can really be doing good for my country, for the world. I can really tap into my sense of purpose. It's almost like a niche within a niche or a niche within a niche. If I'm listening, I'm thinking it just sounds so good, such an amazing thing to be a part of. Where would I start? How would I get to maybe not exactly as high as where you are now, but how would I get into your area of expertise? Where would I start there?
I think that the most important thing is just that no two paths are alike. I started out at Drexel University in the mechanical engineering program. I really quickly realized that I was not cut out for math. I was not prepared for calculus. And I decided to change to business. I started in the business program at Drexel, and I had actually gotten waitlisted for my first and second choice colleges for engineering. And it was a blessing in disguise because if I had been at one of those colleges, they were engineering schools. There was no business, there was no fallback. I would have had to transfer. Like I said, no two paths are the same. I got into this completely by accident, but I think the most important thing is to find a good mentor in your organization. I found a couple of guys that worked at Lockheed. I'm ashamed and sad to say that I never really had a good leader in my organizational chain until I was working at GRSI, and I had a great mentor when I was there who was actually finally my manager. But before that, I had very weak managers. I did not have leaders. So mentorship, I think, is really important. And then finding the what's important to you, what gets you out of bed. It's trite, and a lot of people say that, but I spent a lot of time at home thinking about what it was that I was doing at work and how to prepare for the things that I needed to do. Stressful, but they say that if something keeps you up at night, it's probably worth doing, right?
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Well, I can imagine you're not short of motivation, mate, at any time, or especially at the minute. Yeah, I bet you're springing out of bed. You mentioned their mentors. Again, it's something we talk about quite a bit on the show. I'm in full agreement with you. I think they're absolutely imperative. Just that mentor piece is obviously really important. A couple of questions. How do I get one? How do I secure one? And when I have got one, what does that relationship look like? How is it maintained? How do you keep it healthy and perhaps ideally mutually beneficial? Things like that. Any tips for the listeners on that point, mate?
I think the most important way that they happen, a lot of bigger companies will have formal mentorship programs. Certainly, Lockheed had a leadership development program for different business units. They had engineering and finance and management, and I didn't go that track. The guy that ended up being my biggest mentor at Lockheed just happened upon him by accident. He was running a program that I was asked to do some support for, and we struck up a cordial relationship. I started going to him for certain advice to deal with certain situations, and it just evolved into an informal mentor-mentee relationship. At one point in time, I asked him if he would mind being my mentor, and he just said, yeah, sure, happy to do it. So in a lot of instances, it also will have to do with the amount of time that senior leader has and whether they can devote time and resources to be able to foster the relationship and provide any things that they've learned in their time in industry.
Thank you, mate. I think it's such an important point for people. I think it can just develop so much these days, mate, can't it? Because I think we've talked about it before on the show again, but like, there's different types of mentors. One could be like a cybersecurity influencer that you're watching for half an hour a night. One could be someone you're actually physically working with, or you're working with in
Mhm.
a remote environment. You can have different sorts of mentors, maybe even mentors in your personal life to a certain extent. There's kind of different versions of different people that are going to guide you, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a couple of buddies that are 10 or so years older than me, and looking at them and their experiences have helped shape some of the directions that I've gone down in making decisions in my professional and my personal life.
Mm,
It's definitely important to find people that know more than you and are
mm,
willing to talk to you about the things that they do know. A lot of people in this country, in the world, especially men, we don't reach out to other people and we don't seek people to help us with problems. Just looking at the United States in general, we have a huge issue with men's psychological health.
mm,
And I think that if people reached out on both sides, if people reached out to other people to say, hey, you seem like you're struggling or you need some help with this, that would do just as much as someone who is struggling and seeks someone and says, hey, could you help me with this? And
mm.
there's so many different ways that a mentor mentee relationship can go in every aspect of your life.
Yeah, there is. And Joseph, that's a really good point you mentioned there. And just being open, I think actually to be open and a bit vulnerable, I actually think it shows real strength and real character. I think it's all too easy just to front it and say that everything's cool when it's not. Whereas if you really actually want to be strong, I think just admitting, because we all feel these ways. We all feel nervous. We all get worried. We all get anxious. There was a great quote on another podcast I listened to, and it was saying basically, when you see confident people, they're channeling nerves, anxiety, worry, they're channeling it into forward action and energy. And it just looks like confidence. And I was like, wow, that's such a good way of saying it. Because when we look at these confident people, we sometimes think, God, I wish I was like that. But we all have these feelings. It's how we manage them. And I think opening up and expressing how you feel, it takes it from here and from your head, just and it gets it off, and it just, I think it just helps you move forward and makes you feel 10 times better, doesn't it, buddy?
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool, man. We're going to come on to community. It's obviously a vital part of progression within security. Obviously, you've progressed right up to director level, so communication would have been an intrinsic part of that path. I think it's being talked about more these days. I still think we need to talk about it more and get it going more because it's such an important piece of the career progression journey within security. What advice have you got for people listening in terms of enhancing and refining communication skills?
Communication is so important, oral, written, being able to convey your ideas clearly. And it's tough to get to the point where you can speak to all different audiences. Part of my job is talking to senior military officers. I have a great relationship and have had a great relationship with the last few executive leaders in my companies. And last few companies that I've worked for have been very small, but I got comfortable sitting down and talking to a CEO. And it wasn't always like that. I remember the first time I sat down with my CEO at GRSI, I had rehearsed my presentation probably 15 times and completely fell apart in the middle of it because I had done so much thinking and I had gotten myself into such a script that the first time a question was asked, it derailed my script. And so being able to think on your feet is super important. And I even struggle with that after 20 plus years of being in industry. Certainly when I was in high school and in college, a lot of my time in various classes was spent in group work, was spent in presentations, learning those skills. Like I said, I was a business major. Capstone was a 40-page paper and I think a 30-minute presentation as a group. So during that time, not only was I learning to speak to audiences, but I was also learning how to write. And it's writing I find to be very difficult sometimes because I'm a very type A personality. I'm very direct and to the point. I've lived in the South for the past 12 years. People in the South don't really do direct and to the point, especially if they're from the South. Being able to write an email and then think about what it is that you really wanted to say and the point you really wanted to get across and then think about how what you did say will be interpreted, and then maybe make some tweaks to it is important. And going back to mentorship, there were a lot of times that when I was starting my career in New Jersey, where type A personalities are like a dime a dozen, I would even send emails to some of my leaders there, say, "Hey, was I a little too over the top on this?" And sometimes would get the, "Yeah, you probably want to tone that one down." It's a learned skill. It takes a lot of work, and you have to be cognizant of always who your audience is.
Yeah, definitely. By the way, that direct, concise, to the point. Like when I'm dealing with larger companies, I'm dealing with sometimes internal recruiters and stuff. But when I'm dealing with smaller companies, I'm often dealing with directors and founders. Mate, all you directors and founders are to the point and concise. That's just the way you guys like it. Yeah, no, it's cool. Everyone, you just like to the and I say C-suite people tend to be busy. Joseph, one thing you just said there, and you pushed over it, and I think it's a really good point. You asked for feedback on your communicative style in a written format. I think that's absolutely, I don't think that should be, I think that's really important. I wonder how many people listening that have actually do that and do that on a regular basis. Probably not many, man. I think that's massively valuable. I'm imagining at the time when you did that, it helped you refine and tweak and do things and improve in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's about who your audience is, how they will interpret what it is that you say, and then how you go past that. And if you are in any way attacking, if you are not conveying the information properly, you're just going to get no response, or you're going to get a negative response. And working in technology for so long, working especially in cyber, where everybody thinks that cyber is just something where you stick a bunch of stuff in a box and you shake it and cyber comes out. And that's not the way it works. It's a huge effort. It involves everybody in the organization, from the janitor who has a key card all the way up to the CEO who has to take ultimate responsibility for all cyber risks in the organization. And if you're looking for money from your senior leadership, you're looking for buy-in from lower level staff, you need to be able to convey to them the implications of what it is you're talking about, whether it's for a janitor, just the fact that they don't lose their key card, right? Losing key card gives someone physical access to your building. They could get physical access to your server room. We all know that if you have physical access to a server, that server is owned. When you're going for resources from your senior and executive leadership team, if they don't understand the return on investment for what it is that you're asking for, you're not getting that money.
Yeah, no, definitely, man. And I think as well, you mentioned about being able to communicate with different sorts of people. You mentioned living in the South and having to adapt there. And I think in the US that's more prevalent than ever. Like I find state to state, like if like we don't do so much in Europe anymore, but in like Holland, like Dutch people, like there's a certain culture there, and that's called UK, kind of similar, maybe differentiate a little bit.
Very to the point, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but in the US, because it's like
Yeah.
I find like people in New York and are different to people in California, different to people in Texas, and it's you. I think that adaptability when communicating with different types of people, I think that particular skill set needs to be on point more than anywhere. In the US, you've got to have that nailed down. I think if you're going across the country.
Yes, can confirm that.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to ask you about people breaking in and coming into the industry. It'd be nice to hear your thoughts and tips and advice on that. I'll twist it a little bit in the sense that there is a lot of companies still hiring at the minute. I know we'll see. I think Tesla did some layoffs 2 or 3 days ago, and we keep seeing these big headlines, and everyone says it's all doom and gloom. I know there's loads of companies still hiring, but having said that, I know there's a lot of people on the market that are struggling, even at the senior end, certainly at the mid end, and at the junior end. There's always people trying to break in, but essentially, any thoughts and any advice for people trying to break in or people trying to get back into a job if they've gone through some tough times?
Yeah, so there are a couple of different ways to unpack that. Actually, was laid off in November of 2022. My first time ever. I survived about 8 layoffs when I was at Lockheed, and I had just gotten to the point in the company that I was at that you couldn't pronounce, that nobody can pronounce, Prescient, where the contract billable work that I had been working on with the Marines, it dried up. There was some overhead work that I had worked on, and we'd gotten to the end of that, and I found myself without a job for the first time since 2005. And getting back to where I am now, getting back to Netizen, it was all interpersonal relationships that got me where I was. I had a customer that I had worked with on the Army side in when I did my first round with Netizen, who I think he'd probably agree that he would adopt me if he could. That was because I was good at my job, right? I came in with a lot of Navy experience that dovetailed in really well with what it was the Army was doing at the time. And I led the team down there despite having no formal leadership role and working, making a couple of calls to him and to some of the leadership at Netizen. We were able to work something out. The Army created a position for me. And obviously that's on the senior level. On the junior level, I think it's just being open to doing whatever jobs there are. You get a foothold. My first job in IT was working help desk for a nonprofit organization in Philadelphia, and because I showed the smallest amount of mechanical aptitude, I got the crappy jobs. Like we moved into a new building and I had to go help the facilities guy run thousands of new fiber cables because the dot com that had been there before, all the wires. I volunteered to come in on Saturday and Sunday to help do server moves. I took any of the jobs that were available and I looked for things that were more than just sitting there waiting for a phone call to come in. Mid-level is really tough because you're at a point where you have in your life upward pressure to increase your salary, to get better benefits. Generally, people that are mid-level will say 7 to 12 years of experience. You've got young kids, the bills. We certainly know that the economy is doing really right now in the United States. Unemployment is at all-time lows. The market's doing well, but we're still dealing with inflation. And workers are all looking to get pay bumps, which means they might be looking to jump from company to short stints at each company. And I know that there's an old adage, and I think it's very dated, that a lot of people, if you jump from place to place, you have no loyalty. Day and age, I think that in very few instances there's any loyalty from the company, and that should be reciprocated on the worker side. I'm not going to say that I think you should be some radical workers' rights person talking about complete unionization, but at the same time, I think that younger junior level and mid level workers need to recognize that companies don't have a lot of loyalty for you. And certainly that's not every company. I think that my current company has a ton of loyalty towards me and me towards them, but that's a trust relationship that we've worked out over the course of a few years. Certainly a big company is going to have a lot less loyalty when really all you are is a number.
Mm.
I was just say, like I said earlier about education and things, everybody's story, everybody's path is different. And there's certainly no one size fits all. But I think being open to doing things that aren't necessarily in your wheelhouse or aren't part of your stated responsibilities and job description, I think it's super important. And it shows your leadership that you're willing to take on new challenges and learn.
It does, man. And I think that type of attitude that you've clearly adopted, I just think it gets you everywhere. That kind of down to earth, prepared to grind, prepared to get involved, humble. I just think people look over, whether it's in a physical environment, literally do look over, or even in a remote, just see that you're cracking on and putting the effort in. And I just think it's a nice thing to do. It creates opportunity, and I think it gains respect amongst your peers. I really do think it gets you everywhere. It's really interesting to me to talk there, Joe, because again, you'd look at you now and it all looks really rosy and great. And it's just interesting to hear, obviously, like getting laid off, dealing with tough times, come back. And I think it's really important for people to hear that. And again, hearing about you mentioned, did you say you moved some server cables or something over the weekend? Doing
Yeah.
whatever it takes. Just let's say whatever it takes. And I don't want to like necessarily bad mouth new people coming onto the market, but I do know that hand on heart, sometimes some people they just want to ping out the odd message and do this and that. You've got to do more than what everyone else do, and you've got to put yourself out there. You've got to pay forward a bit, and if you take that longer term approach, it pays off, buddy, doesn't it?
I think so. And I was talking to my son about this. He's going into seventh grade next year. And so he's starting to think about trying to get into a magnet high school. He's got a lot of academic aptitude. We have a great academic high school here in Charleston. And then thinking about what it's behind. He's wanted to be a rocket designer, a rocket engineer, whatever, literally since he was probably 3 years old. He's obsessed with rockets. And so we started talking about how to go about getting into that field. And he's okay, I have to go do this and I have to go to this school and then I have to go get a master's degree in this. And I said, look, bud, like there are 100 different ways for you to crack this egg. and find the way that works for you. But while you're in high school, you're involved in different activities. And he's involved in Scouts BSA. I'm a assistant scoutmaster. The lower ranks, and I think this is a good analog towards working in industry, the lower ranks in scouting are focused on hard skills. How do you build a fire? How do you pitch a tent? How do you hike? What things do you need to bring with you? Knots, all of that kind of stuff. Once you get into the mid level and higher level of scouting, it's all about leadership. They
Mm.
want you to have, and we're a scout led troop. The adults figure out how to pay for it and how to get people from place to place, but it's the scouts that do the planning, and they figure out what their meals are. They figure out what they need to bring with them from an equipment standpoint. They are responsible for telling the quartermaster if they need something breaks and they need new stuff, getting him to the point where he's prepared to take on a leadership role in scouts is going to set him up to be a leader when he's in college and beyond. There's no surprise, for all of its warts and scandals and everything. Scouting has set up a lot of executive leadership and senior leadership in this country and around the world, not just in the business area, but in the political area. I think something like 70% of former presidents of the United States since the beginning of the 1900s were Eagle Scouts. I know that 87% of statistics are made up on the spot, so totally making up that statistic, but it's a significant thing.
By the way, mate, I think your boy getting into that at a young age because it will mold. I think it's great, and I got this theory, Joe, that since AI and automation comes in, I just think communication skills and everything you've just described and leadership, it's just going to increase, and its importance is just going to go up tenfold. Because I think a lot of the more simple stuff and certainly stuff at junior stuff, I'm already seeing it's getting done by AI and in-house tools that some of my clients are building. But though again, those communication skills and being able to deal and handle and problem solve complex tasks and have that human interaction, I think it will just get more and more important because a lot of this lower level stuff is just getting done. So I think even more.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Mm.
anecdotally, I had an employee that at one point was using generative AI to complete assignments. And knowing him and the way he wrote, I said to him, "Hey, that sounds like ChatGPT wrote it." And he was like, and I said, "Okay." And then I kept seeing more, and I was like, "No, this just doesn't sound like this guy." And I had no problem. And certainly I've used ChatGPT or Bard or one of the others for writing prompts. I am not the best at doing RFP responses, right? I do that in my spare time when my boss says, "Hey, I need a page written on something." And so I look at the requirements of the RFP and I think, what is it they're asking for? I don't really know a lot about this. And what's great for a writing prompt, you ask them something or ask ChatGPT something, it'll give you a paragraph of kind of distilled verbiage, and then you can build an outline from that. And then you can start outlining that with things that you research and go talk to people in your company to get more specific information about what you're doing. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how AI presents itself to the world in the next few years. And thinking back when I was young, I was a very early user of computers. My grandfather was a programmer for AT&T, and so I grew up on computers. And I remember sitting at my stepdad's computer terminal, which was just a dumb terminal connected to a mainframe somewhere, seeing that progression to PCs and then to the ubiquity of
Mm.
computing devices and what it meant for the economy. The 90s economy, a significant portion of it is based on the fact that things got easier to do with computers and cheaper to do. No more paper forms, and banking transactions were easier. Electronic documents were easier to deal with. And so hopefully AI has that effect. But there are a lot of nefarious uses. Going back to Israel and Iran, I was just reading something on one of the military blogs that I read, positing that Israel should use some of the deep fake AI to create videos as propaganda and send them through Iran to essentially start a coup against the Iranian leaders. Where does that go?
Mate,
You
it's
can only
just
legislate so much. In the United States, we have no privacy controls, barely. Certainly, GDPR in the EU is a heck of a lot better. We don't do that here because companies own our politicians.
mm.
And And that's a really rough thing as a privacy advocate. So where does it end with AI and deepfake? And can somebody just create deepfake videos of politicians or somebody and prove that they did something? How good will that get? I don't know.
It's a crazy world, and you start thinking about going across different geographies and different jurisdictions, and then you start thinking about different governments are involved. And hang on, that government's not really talking to that government at the minute, so how would that work? And you could make it illegal in that country, but then it's a lot. It's pretty complex, isn't it, to get it to get like a cohesive type of regulate. You could do it in one country,
Yeah.
but then people can still do it anyway. But it's
Multi-tenancy in cloud environments, thinking about if you're Google or Microsoft or Amazon and you've got data that's owned by a European country that processes the data of European and US citizens, how do you apply protections for multi-tenancy to make sure that the EU data is protected in accordance with GDPR, the American data is protected according to whatever passes for a privacy law that we have in the United States. And that's a huge problem for everyone to solve as far as data tagging, plenty of issues.
It's so true. I'm talking about Holland a lot today for some reason, but it's so true about the data regs. Certain parts you can't even email people unless you've got permission and stuff like that. You've literally got to know them already or have a network there already, or it's just really hard to even. So, but in the US, there isn't any of that, and yeah, there is obviously it is open to all sorts. Joe, on the AI, I know you mentioned about someone in your organization using it and you're spotting it and stuff like that. Have you ever used it? Have you ever used it on the LinkedIn or anything like that? I've literally pressed it to do a post, and it just like doubles or triples the length of my post, and it's really wordy. I just wondered how you found it.
So actually, my last job posting, I wrote, I don't know, 10 sentences, what I was looking for. And then I had a prompt that said, would you like to AIify this?
Okay.
And I said, yeah, sure. Let's see what it looks like. And I think there are different options. There's make it longer, make it improve grammar or something like that. And I clicked a couple of buttons, found one that I liked and published it. I'll take the hit on using AI to improve my job posting, but I thought that it was super helpful. Like I have trouble talking about myself. Like when I go to update my resume, I sit there and I think that sounds stupid.
Okay.
Maybe being able to write out an idea into a generative AI capability and then saying, make this more professional. Maybe that's something that I need to start thinking about when it comes time to update my resume and write job recs.
Yeah, cool. I just want to, as you were talking, then you got me thinking because when you said about 10 minutes ago, you sat in front of, I think, a leader or CEO or someone at C-suite level, and you were like practically reading a script, and he or she said something to you, and it completely knocked you off course. And I don't think you said your communication was rubbish, but you've obviously got a lot better since. And my question is, how did you get so clearly at that point your communication was struggling? Now to hear you just like bang, it's just clearly there, it's all flowing. For people listening that are struggling with communication, that do feel apprehensive about using it and getting better, how do you get from the day when you were sat in that CEO's office, fumbling and getting caught off track in your mind when you were reading off a script in your mind? How do you get from there to where you are now, mate? Any other tips on that for people?
Number one is repetition. I've been in so many situations where I've had to brief senior and executive leadership on different things. My dog is asking for pets here.
It's fine. Listen, this is post COVID podcasting, mate. All that's allowed now.
Yeah, if he could jump into my lap, he would, I'm sure. But so repetition was important. But then I think it's also insanely important to just remember that executive leaders are people, right? They put their pants on one leg at a time. They might have nicer pants than you, but they're no different than you from a biological or whatever makeup that you want to talk about. They have different needs because they have to be very to the point. They need the bottom line. We call it in the military area, we call it bluff, bottom line up front. And so a lot of times when I'm sending an email to senior leadership, I give them the bluff and then I give them everything else. And I tend to be very verbose with written communications, especially. So the bluff helps, right? I'm telling you what it is that you need to know and what you need to take action on. And then I'm giving you the backstory. And you can choose to read that if you want to. You can skim it, but getting to the point is super important. And then, like I said, from a being nervous standpoint, it's a conversation. It's two people talking, maybe more than two people. But I taught merit badges over the winter at my son's winter scouts camp, and talking to a bunch of teenagers who don't really want to listen to you and they want to just screw around on their phones. That's way worse than talking to executive leadership.
Yeah, mate, I can, but it's hard to prize it, to prize the device off them, hey?
Oh, I can't speak for any other troops, but for ours, when we go on campouts, we take the cell phones away as soon as we get to where we're going. And then they get locked in the cars and they don't come out until we get back in the car at the end of the weekend.
Thank you, Matt. I'm just going to break that down for people because that was really good. So basically, we've got one, repetition. We've got two, just remember if it's a CTO, CEO, COO, whatever, they are just people. I think you used the phrase, they just put their pants on the same way as we do. And then this third point, I really like, bluff. The bottom line up front. So basically, get that important info out. Bang. If it's on an email, if it's in verbal communication, get that important info out and then give the details secondary. And then the final point you mentioned was just communicating again to different types of people, whether it's coaching or dealing with the younger folks, shall we say. Yeah, thanks, mate. They're the four main points, yeah?
Yeah, I think so. And then also, if someone wants to improve on that, take a persuasive writing class. If you've got access to something in like community college, get a book on persuasive writing. In every conversation in business, a sale is made, and I think that's from the movie Boiler Room. Either you're selling somebody on why they should buy something, or they're selling you a line on why they shouldn't. And so it's not, when you're having interpersonal conversations with leadership, you're talking to them. Generally, you're doing that because you need them to take action on something. So tell them why tell them what they need to do, why you need them to do it, and then what happens monetarily, physically, whatever, if they don't do it.
Yeah, thank you, mate. And by the way, you're right on the communication piece, whether it's the selling, whether it's the whole they're selling you selling it, you think, for anyone that's really technical, there's like, do I need this? Look, you absolutely need it. And all I know is if your technical skills are phenomenal, and you do work on the communication skills, I just know you're going to go very far. You're going to have a secure career. You're going to put a force field around you. You're going to progress. You're going to have leadership, management options if you want, because there's a lot of technical people out there that probably won't. So I think if you do, it's a really good way to stand out and just really make sure your career progression is optimal, isn't it?
Yeah, and there are a lot of technical people that just want to stay technical, and totally respect that. A buddy of mine that has worked for me in two other organizations, he doesn't want to be in a real hard leadership role, despite me trying to push him because he has an aptitude for it. He wanted to stay technical, and that's fine. I gave up being technical a long time ago. I can still I still know my way around a Linux system, could jump onto a Solaris 10 box and do all kinds of fun stuff. But reality is if you put me in front of a Cisco switch and told me to set up spanning tree or something like that, I would go and I would find a book, or I'd start Googling, which is what 90% of people in IT do anyway.
Hey, mate, you make a really good point because it's not for everyone. You're absolutely right. And I know from recruitment stuff I've said to people on senior appointments we've worked in the past, if it's people trying to perhaps step into, if they're coming up or they're newly into a lead, I'm like, are you sure? Because I've had it in the past where people do, you get those calls going, I'm missing the hands being on the keyboard. And I've had those calls a few times over the years. So you've got to be really sure that it's for you because it's not easy. And you are going to have different egos, personalities, and if people are very good at a certain aspect of security, there probably is going to be a lot of different types of egos involved, especially in maybe not as much at the minute, but in red hot markets, I think there really is. On the teaching side, by the way, I know before we came on, we're talking about your baseball coaching and stuff like that. Does that help, mate? Because I'm imagining you're obviously dealing with people there. I'm imagining you're probably liaising with the parents if you're teaching your boy and the team how to play baseball. Is that help with dealing with different types of people and again on the leadership and communication piece?
Between being involved in scouts and then being involved with my son's baseball team, yeah, I have found when other people were coaching my son's teams that communication tended to break down. It was tough to get ground truth about things. And so I'm probably an over communicator. I have a great assistant coach that is just as organized as I am, put together a spreadsheet with all kinds of information in it. And so whenever I need to, I can go back to that spreadsheet, get the information out of it, and then go push it to people. And so I use multiple ways to communicate with them. Being able to talk to parents from different socioeconomical backgrounds. And then Charleston, that we joke around that everybody here is from Ohio or New Jersey, which is true, but I'm dealing with people that are some people that are Southern, some people that are from the Northeast, some people from California, some people from foreign countries. And so dealing with not just their communication styles, but their cultures, understanding a little bit about where their children might be coming from and the backgrounds that they might have, it's it helps me a lot in business as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. Culture's a massive thing. I notice on the recruiting side, depending on if we're working on a global search, you really feel it with different cultures. So it's a good point, mate. All right, Joseph. As we come to the end here, I normally save this question for a bit later on, but I'll ask you now: any kind of books or podcasts or material that you're consuming lately, or you have done at any point over your career that's benefited you from a self-development standpoint that could also benefit the listeners?
Yeah, I tend not to read a whole lot of business books. I couldn't even tell you the last one that I read. It was probably when I was doing my master's degree and like for my project management course. But from a cyber perspective, I listen to the Security Now podcast from Gibson Research Corporation. I get a lot of information from LinkedIn. Certainly, working in the military side, we get a lot of top down communication from higher echelon commands on emerging threats, on vulnerabilities that are coming down that have been recognized by the vendors or recognized by threat hunting organizations. I don't want to say drip fed, but it's definitely force fed to me. And there's a feedback loop, right? I need to read that because I need to respond to the higher echelon commands on whether or not something that we're running is vulnerable to it, or if it is something that may be an issue with plans that we have in the future. I was going to talk about something and then realize that it's probably not one of those things that's releasable, but
Mate, tell
you
us,
know,
tell us.
yeah, I wish I could. Not that it's secret, but I don't think that the customer would be happy. But one of the things that we talked about in the last podcast that we haven't talked about now is certifications.
Mm,
And there are so many different avenues to study for certs. I have the CISSP ISSAP book here from ISC squared, and I haven't opened it. I borrowed it from one of the guys that works for me, and I want to take the ISSAP exam. I've got the EP, I've got the MP, and I want the trifecta because there was only like 140 people worldwide that have all three, one of which is one of my former employees, and I can't have him have more certs than I have. So if you're watching this, Han, I'm coming for you. But I found that at least for studying for certs, when I'm reading books, I want non-official stuff. I've never found that a certifying organization does a very good job, whether that's ISACA, ISC squared, or CompTIA, that they do a very good job of portraying the information that they want you to know for the test. They may have a good outline. The CBK, for whatever it is, might tell you what they want you to know, but it takes certain authors, certain educators to actually be able to provide that to you. Shon Harris, who passed a few years ago, she wrote basically the CISSP Bible, and it's 4 inches thick. Without that book, I don't think I would have passed that exam. But it was a great all-in-one guide for all of the things that I need to know. If I just read the ISC squared book, no way I would have passed the test. Who Ben Maslow, I'm connected with him on LinkedIn. I've gone through a few of his courses. City employees have access to a website called FedVTE that's got probably something like 100 cybersecurity courses. And I went through his ISSEP and his ISSMP courses, and maybe his CISM course as well. And he did a great job of presenting the material in a way that was consumable.
Cool. And then these the search you mentioned there, the CISSP especially, is that helped on the leadership side as
Yeah, absolutely. It is CISSP is completely non-technical. And
well?
so it's all about processes, and you learn a lot about what I was talking about earlier, getting senior leadership, executive leadership buy-in for whatever your initiative is and showing them the cost of doing it versus not doing it, and then what the cost of exploitation or of recovery would be. So there's the CISSP goes into so many things. Like I said, that book is an absolute bear to read, but it was super important when I took my exam.
Definitely, mate. And I like the fact you mentioned about the information getting drip fed down to you and then consuming that information. I think it all like loops back into communication. If you're consuming awesome information, and then that makes the quality of your conversations and the content of your conversations better, and then that leads on to something else, and all of a sudden your communication's getting rocking and rolling, and things are looking good. So I think it all goes hand in hand. Mate, I really like that bluff thing, by the way. I keep thinking
Well,
about that.
I was just thinking about that. I guess I'm now at the point where I've got people that are providing bluffs to me. I actually have a new person that started yesterday on my team, and so I'll be training her up here over the next couple of weeks. But I've been dealing with a lot of these force-fed directives from the government or from higher echelons of the government. And now it's more where he gets to go read them, she gets to distill them, decide if they're applicable to us, and then give me a bluff so that I can go give a bluff to someone else. And it's just as we go higher, we take more and more information out and we just make
Yeah.
it higher level and more to the point.
Yeah. So when you is it exactly so? Are you separating it? Is it like the first paragraph? Is it like you got the short paragraph with the so bottom line up front? So that first is it like a separate paragraph? That first bit of the key bit of information, and then the next paragraph is what is that a bit longer, and that's the detail. Is that how you structure it? And is it just two
Yeah, it
paragraphs?
depends on the email. I've written emails that are pages long. If you're telling someone about a success, the bluff should be mission success. This is how we achieved it. These were the objectives that we completed. And then the rest of the email, that should be 2 to 3 sentences. The rest of the email should be here's who was involved, who did what, the problems that we may have encountered. Certainly, if there was a problem that was a showstopper that stopped you from being able to complete tasking, that's what should be in the bluff as well. But yeah, it just depends on the communication. But yeah, 2 to 3 sentences is exactly what you need for that bluff. And then you can write a Stephen King book afterwards if you
Mm,
want to.
yeah, I think that's really good. I think you could actually adopt that strategy for posting content online, for
Mhm.
grabbing your followers or your audience in. You could probably kind of take aspects of that for report writing, and I suppose that's a kind of in a way what an exec summary is meant to be. You can see bits of it coming in everywhere, but yeah, I can see why it. I can see. I bet you've had some fun with that over the years, mate. I can see why it works. It's good. It's really
Yeah,
good.
I've got it up here on another screen, and I feel like we didn't get to half of it, but yeah, we had a good conversation. So invite me back again, and we'll get to the rest.
Yeah, we will. And no, honestly, mate, thanks. It's genuinely really flowed, and I've really enjoyed it, mate. And it's really interesting getting your insights and your strategy. Some of the communication stuff there will, without a doubt, mate, will help people and help the listeners. Thanks
Hope
again,
so.
mate. And it's flown, mate. That like an hour's gone really quick. Yeah, thanks again for your time, mate. And I'll see you soon, Joseph. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate the time.